But one case where this did happen, was like it was, property lines actually were it was hard for me to tell where they were, and we didn't have a survey. It was a private landowner. They opted not to get a survey. And I had aligned the trail in a certain way, thinking the property line was, like, pretty far away, and it was a crux point, right? It was like I had to snake some turns through the steep area. And it turned out that I was over the property line by, like, some distance, and luckily we caught it before, before things progressed. But I did have to do some tricky things with the turn. We had to really we had a tight space to kinda get the trail down the hill.
Welcome. This is Lauren Stites, and you are listening to Her Side of the Trail. If you've ever been out on a hiking trail and wondered, why did they design the trail this way? This episode is for you. This episode, I'm speaking with Sarah Walter, who is a landscape architect and trail designer. She goes into the full process of planning, implementing, and finalizing the trail. I found this very interesting and have a new appreciation behind trail design, and I hope you do too. So let's get into it. Hi, Sarah. Thank you for joining me today. I'm so excited to talk to you about trail design. Like, every hiker needs to know the process that goes into this. So I really appreciate you being here, talking to me about that. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yay. I usually ask this of everyone just because I'm always curious about what brings people to the outdoors. But did you grow up in an outdoorsy family? Were you out hiking a lot? Or is that something that you developed later in life, your love of the outdoors?
I wouldn't say that I grew up in an outdoorsy family. I mean, a little bit. Yeah, I mean, a little, like, not as a family. But, like, my dad took me canoeing, when I was a kid, and I spent a lot of time outside. Like,
Yeah,
I
that
was always out
counts.
there. I was an only child, so,
Gotcha.
I was always out, like, playing imaginary games and, making little shelters out of sticks and,
Climbing trees.
climbing trees, yeah, and my dad collected rocks, and so he introduced me to that, so, like,
That's
geology,
cool.
and I was always really into animals, um, and wildlife and biology and that kinda stuff, so that was my interest, and then later in high school, I got more into, like, canoeing, hiking, like, a little more outdoor adventure type stuff.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah, but I would say an appreciation of nature
Oh,
from a
of
very
course.
young age. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
I would think to
Yeah.
do what you do, you would have to have that like innately. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny, I always say, like, one of my goals when I design trails is to help people see what I see out there,
I love
because I'm
that.
always
Yes.
looking at little goofy details, funny shaped trees or,
Yeah.
a rock or just something, and I know a lot of people don't see that stuff, so I wanna help them, see it how I see it.
There's a park in New Jersey. It's called Sourland Mountain Preserve. I don't know if you've
Mhm.
ever been there, but there is a rock that
Oh.
literally looks like it's eating a tree and the trail goes right by it. And I'm like, I know the trail design was like, people need to see this rock that's eating the tree.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So how did you get into trail design then?
That's a really good question. Um, so I didn't know that it existed, right, for most of my life.
Why would you even think about
And
it, right? Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and like I said, I wasn't really, in a family that was traveling to do hiking, so I hadn't been to trails out west or, any of the really iconic trails. But then, I actually was interested. It's gonna be a long story,
That's
a
fine.
longish story. So I was interested in being an architect, because I come from an art background, right? I was doing art all through as a child, all through school. Um, was interested in maybe going to art school, but thought architecture might have a little more, like, as many
Stability
artists
to it,
do, like,
maybe. Yeah.
stability, utility, which, like, whatever. But,
Yeah.
that thought process you go through when you're a kid or young. And, I attended kind of a summer arts program, and the focus was architecture, and my instructor actually said, "Hey, have you considered landscape architecture? Because a lot of the things you're making have this more naturalistic quality to them." And I was like, "That's interesting. No one had ever really shared that with me before." And I looked into landscape architecture, and I was really interested because it seemed like this combination of all my interests, right? It was like design and art and, biology and geology and soils and topography and mapping. It was like all of these things. So I went to school for that, graduated, in 2010, which was a horrible time
Oh
to
gosh, yes.
graduate and join the workforce, right? And, so then my first kind of, like, real job out of school was in a planning office, at the county level. working in conservation, so it was very meaningful work, but very administrative and bureaucratic, and I got bored, um, with that. But I was there for about 6 years, like, I was there for quite
So
some
a good
time.
learning experience though
Yeah, it
too,
was a
right?
great
Yeah.
learn and I use a lot of that still today. I'm really grateful for that experience. So, and then someone I went to school with contacted me out of the blue and said, "Are you interested? Are you looking for a job?" And I was like, "Not really, but what, what do you got?" And she had been working on a temp basis for Penn Trails, which is the company that I then went to work for. So she told me about it, and I was like, what do you mean trail design is a thing? Like I can do that, So it was very eye opening, and it's exposed me to this whole world, which has now become my career. So
That's incredible. I love that.
yeah, yeah.
And very grateful for people who do what you do.
Thank you. It's a joy. So I mean, I'm
Good.
grateful that I can do it.
So I know this is probably like a multi-part question, whatever, but I was wondering, like, how long is the typical trail design process? Like from when you guys are being reached out to by whatever entity it is to when the trail is available for public use? About how long
Mhm.
does that take? Is that a
Yeah.
multi-year process, I assume?
Yeah, it really varies, and it depends on, so many factors. The complexity of the trail, the type of funding that would be involved, the ownership of the parcel. Like if it's a private landowner,
Mhm.
it can be very fast,
Yes. They don't have
shockingly
all the
fast.
red tape to go through.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, sometimes private trails can be built to a much lower standard, but if it's something that runs into a lot of environmental constraints like wetlands, or if there's bridges or structural elements, or funding, sometimes these projects are multi-million-dollar projects, so we have to phase it, and, it gets done over time. So, usually the initial design process, though, for me is like, I don't know, 4 months, 6 months, sometimes 8 months at the longest, depending on who's reviewing it or if there's community engagement involved. But then from there, it can really vary to when it actually gets implemented. Yeah, it could be a year or 2 all the way to, I mean, I know of trails that have taken 10 years to get
Oh,
built.
wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's crazy. Now, what role does your company then, Penn Trails, as you mentioned,
Mhm.
what are they responsible for? Just the design, or are they also part of like the construction of the trail, or
So I am sort of a design focused firm. I mentioned that my background is in landscape architecture, and that's always been, so the company's been around since 2007. Um, but well, and design has really always been the focus. But we do take projects all the way through construction. So I'm not like a lot of other trail construction companies. A lot of them focus on construction, and the design ends up being sort of like a way to get to that. Uh, I'm not a contractor first, I am a designer first, and so I will take on sort of like, special selected construction projects, and I'll assemble a crew to get them done, if they fit kind of my goals and, what I wanna do at the time, if it's a good fit. Yeah.
how do you decide the trail route? And I know that's also a very loaded question, but is there a way for you to kind of condense that answer? Like, how do you decide which way the trail is going to go? I know you touched on like environmental factors, things like that. Obviously grade would have something to do with that, correct? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So the first step is to figure out what we're trying to do, like what kind of experience we're trying to create. And I do that through usually talking to the client, some kind of stakeholder group, which might be like the owners, or trying to think who else it would be. Like sometimes it's like a board or a friends group or something like that. And then sometimes it's a broader process of engaging with the public and asking what they want, to have on whatever the site is. And then from there, we can get a sense for how the trail should look and feel. So if we're doing like a backcountry single track trail, it can be more rugged, right? It can have more obstacles. It's narrower. It can be steeper in places versus if I'm designing like a universal access trail, it it tends to be wider. It needs to meet, certain grade parameters. And so right away, then the next step is to go into the field, and kind of start laying out what we call the corridor for this trail. And usually that's like a 50 or 60-foot corridor, right? There's like some like wiggle room where the actual trail alignment can go. But sometimes it's narrower. Like sometimes there might be some kind of feature that really limits where the trail can go, like a bridge crossing, for example, or if we're crossing wetlands or, really steep slopes can kind of limit where you can go or rock features, things like that. So from there, then we get the corridor, and that's kind of a broad like swath of kind of where the trail can go. And then from there, it would be narrowed down, and that might happen sort of in design or sort of as pre-construction flagging, and that's like narrowing it to like the trail is going here, you know?
That's fun though. I always think about that when I'm on the trail. I'm like, what made them decide like to go this way, versus, this way or when to implement switchbacks and when to just make us go straight up the hill.
Yeah, yeah, and there's give and take, right? Like I don't just lay out the trail based on the parameters. That just gives me a sense of how challenging it'll be to get to different things. Like there's definitely a part of every design process that is this sort of inventory and analysis and like ground truthing and scouting of the site, where I'm looking for interesting things. Like because sometimes the brief is very specific. It's like we want to loop around this lake, but sometimes it's like we have 600 acres. Where should we go? And then I'm kind of looking around for, well, what's interesting on this
Yeah.
property?
Like if
What do
there's
I
like cute
like?
little like overlooks or something along the way or
Yeah.
water features, things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. The points of interest, things people would want to see, things to make it an interesting experience.
So you kind of touched on too the universal access trails, and it seems like that am I correct? I was looking at your website and it feels like that is a large focus of your firm, like to work on accessible
Yeah, yeah,
trails
I would say
or
we specialize in universal access trails. The founder and me co-wrote Universal Access Trails. It's Trails for All People. Sorry, it got renamed in I think 2021. Trails for All People, which is a free guide for how to design parameters for these universal access trails. So yeah, it's something I specialize in, but it's not. Is it the bulk of what I do? I would say no. Like I design a pretty good mix of sort
okay.
of more accessible trails, and I do want to say for your audience that that is different from ADA trails, or it's not ADA at all. I should say
Got
that. It's different from the Americans with Disabilities Act. But you might also hear them referred to as all persons trails. A lot of people will also say accessible trails. So there's different terminology. I use universal access trails because that's the name of the guide that we wrote. So yeah.
Now what is the difference then? You say they're not ADA. Is it because you don't have to follow like a certain grade or anything like that? Because I know like the ADA, like if
Yeah,
there's a slope, there's a certain grade you have to have.
that's right. Yeah, so ADA are federal guidelines that affect the design of built spaces, right? And they just don't exist for trails. The ADA, there's no ADA rules for how trails should be built. And so the federal government came out with these guidelines for like the Forest Service and for parks properties, things like
Mm,
that. The sort of govern trails outside of like the ADA regulatory environment. And that's what universal access trails also are.
got
Like they're the same guidelines. They're just meant to apply to like municipalities, states, and like land trust properties. Like any property that would be open to the public and have trails on it. There's sort of a set of best management practices. Like no one is going to come and, say this trail meets it's not one standard, I guess
Yeah.
I'll say. Like it's
Okay.
kind of a spectrum, and we try to incorporate as many of the best management practices as possible into the trail. I don't want to get too
No,
technical,
no,
but
I get that. I get that.
yeah. Yeah.
At in Hawk Mountain in Berks County, have
Oh,
you
yeah.
been to Hawk Mountain in Berks County? They
Uh,
have I don't know if
Not
you've
in
been there.
Berks. Is it in, oh my gosh, Schuylkill County? Is there
I
a
think
different Hawk Mountain?
I thought they were in Berks County, but maybe they
Oh,
straddle? I don't know. But
it
it's
might.
like it's
Here,
not
let me
far from Reading, if that gives you
Yeah,
an
yeah,
idea.
it's
Okay.
Hawk Mountain. Yeah, I've been to
Okay.
Hawk
Okay.
Mountain. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
So they have the Silhouette Trail there,
Yeah.
and they post like what the grade is and the material that they use, so people can again it's a universal access trail. So I'm assuming again it's not the ADA standards, but I thought it was interesting that they had the grade like they're like this is the max grade of the trail, which I think it's a low, it's like 8% or something like that. So
8%. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. Yeah, and a big piece of that is also just communicating objectively what the trail looks and feels like. Because
yeah.
that helps people immediately understand Is this appropriate for me?
Would you find that do you find that planning, like, an accessible trail, universal access trail is more difficult than planning a regular, like, single track trail, or is it's all the same? It's all the same kind of, amount of planning and that goes into it?
It can be more difficult. It can be more difficult to have a site that's compatible. Often you get into steep slopes and it's just not really feasible. So I think looking at a site and understanding like this is um, a good site for it that's conducive to universal access is the first step, right? Like you want to pick a place that has, you know, something that's worth going to, for one. Like I don't I see a lot of places putting in kind of like universal access trails that just are kind of boring, right? They don't really go to the thing. And those might not be like it's good to have opportunities just to get outside and exercise, but I think we should also be providing like real meaningful outdoor sort of adventure experiences that are still accessible for people with mobility disabilities, right?
I love that you said that. Well, because I had on my previous season, a woman, her name's Jennifer Allen, her son has spina bifida, and they do a lot of hiking
Mhm.
together. So, she has to find all these trails. And she was talking about how one of them she thought would lead to a waterfall, and it still didn't lead to the waterfall. It got nowhere near the waterfall. And so,
Yeah.
everyone was disappointed because they thought they had the expectation that they would still get to see the waterfall, and the
Yeah.
trail went nowhere near there. So,
Yeah, and that's such a disappointment, right? Especially if you have like a mobility device and you might have traveled like, I don't know, an hour or more to get to a site and then to get unloaded. And if there's not a bathroom or the trail is damaged and you can't get to whatever the thing is, or there's not even anything there. I mean, it can be really disappointing. And there aren't necessarily other options like to just, oh, well, we'll do something else. Like,
yeah, yeah,
so I
that's
think
their only option, yeah.
yeah, yeah, so I think kinda really putting in that thought about beyond just, like, the physical shape and layout of the trail, like, is this a meaningful experience, for people who need this type of experience?
So you did touch on the guide that you wrote with,
Mhm,
Larry Knutson, who he's the founder of Penn Trails, but
mhm,
now you are the
mhm.
owner of Penn Trails, correct? Yes.
Yes, that's correct, yeah,
And
yeah.
you guys he started the guide and then you, I guess, updated it with him,
Yeah,
correct?
yeah, I think the first edition came out in 2014, and that
Okay.
was funded by Pennsylvania DCNR and We Conserve PA, formerly the PA Land Trust Association at the time. And then we put out another edition, I wanna say in 2021, it was a few years ago now, maybe 2022, but it's free online, so that's
Yeah,
that's the nice
that's
thing about it.
well, that's all I wanted to comment on because I love that you did provide this information free for everyone. And so,
Mhm.
why was that so important for you and Larry to make sure that this information was available to everybody?
I think that was more a function of the funding source, honestly, PALTA, or now WCPA, We Conserve PA, recognized kind of this void in guidance. They do a lot of work with land trusts, as they're formerly the PA Land Trust Association, so that's who forms their membership is land trusts, and Pennsylvania has a really unique land trust environment. It might have the most land trusts of any state. I don't like
Oh,
quote me
wow.
on that,
I didn't
but I
know
know
that.
there's a lot of land trusts, and a lot of them own land and they open it to the public. Like they open up preserves or conserves, they might call them. And so there was kind of this need for guidance related to how do we like provide access, broad access to, big of an audience as possible. Like, how far does ADA apply into the property, like beyond the parking lot? Do we need to be meeting ADA guidelines, not guidelines, but ADA regulations on our trails? So they saw the need for that, and luckily DCNR agreed to fund it.
I'm gonna switch gears here. Just
Yeah.
any of the projects that you've been working on or you've worked on in the past, has there been any kind of like difficulties designing the trail, whether maybe the environment wasn't as conducive to the trail as maybe you first imagined it to be? I've been on trails where I feel like they're like cutting through rocks and stuff like that. Like,
Uh-huh.
have you encountered any projects like that where
Unforeseen
yes.
circumstances. Yeah. I mean, all the time. Like we just can't predict everything. And so, something I've learned, not coming from a construction background, and I really believe this, is that every construction project involves some element of design build. You can't even a building that has full set of architect's drawings, you just can't foresee every
Yeah.
possible circumstance. So yeah, I mean, all the time we run into rocks or we run into, I don't know, all different things. Seeps, water is a big one.
Oh, yeah.
Um, and the key is just leaving that flexibility and kind of thinking ahead to what the uncertainties might be and how you might deal with them. But one case where this did happen was like it was property lines actually were it was hard for me to tell where they were, and we
Oh,
didn't have a
yeah.
survey. It was a private landowner. They opted not to get a survey. Um, and there were no posted signs on their property. And I had aligned the trail in a certain way, thinking the property line was like pretty far away. And it was a crux point, right? It was like I had to snake some turns through the
Mm-hmm.
steep area. And it turned out that I was over the property line
Oh, no.
by like some distance, and luckily we caught it before things progressed. But I did have to do some tricky things with the turn. We had to really like we had a tight space to kind of get the trail down the hill. So yeah, things like that. It just happens. Bedrock is always there. Seeps are always there, like I said. Yeah, and anything with wetlands or like as you get into more complex projects that require like endangered species surveys and things like this. Like there's always things like that that can affect what actually gets built.
Like, don't go by this home of like nesting birds or whatever, like,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's so looking at things after the fact, like any built feature, but trails also like people always ask me like, oh, you just can't look at trails the same ever again. And the answer is no, I can't. But um, it's easy to look at it and be critical, right? Like, "Oh, this is too steep. They should have
Yeah,
done
like,
this. They
why'd
should have
she
done that."
loop this so tight? Well, it's against the
Yeah.
property line.
Yeah, and you just can never know, like, what came up through the process. So
Yeah.
that's it's an exciting part, I think, of the process to see uh how the final thing gets built.
Now, do you think about difficulty level too when you're designing a trail? Like, does someone say to you, "Oh, I want to design a hard trail here or a moderate trail?" Like, do they come up to you for that, or is it just is what it is when it's done?
Yeah, and I think people have the misconception that a difficult trail can just be steep.
Yeah.
And that used to be the case, here in the
Yeah.
Northeast. And like a lot of legacy trails, right? Are just kind of straight up. I'm sure you've been on trails, like many of these types of trails.
Oh, the East Coast here. We just love our straight up the mountain. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, that kind of classic like Adirondack experience. And we've just moved away from that as an industry, right? We have sort of sustainability guidelines now that actually are not that far off from accessible trail
Okay.
guidelines, right? We want to be keeping trails gentle running grades because the steeper they get, the more water is going to run
Water.
down them. Yeah, and you've seen this. I mean, you've seen
Mhm.
trails that are just gullies. Um,
Or
you
they,
want
like,
to
after the fact, add the logs to try to, like, direct the water off the trail.
Exactly. Yeah, and I really don't like seeing those. Uh, they're just not great. Like
No.
anytime you're channelizing water, you're just speeding it up and creating
Yeah.
erosion. So we've really moved away from kind of trying to make like steep trails, and this focus on sustainability is really just a focus in the industry. Um, so we want to keep them this general running grade. We want to incorporate grade dips to let water drain off the side of the trail. Um, and you can incorporate difficulty in other ways. And you can have like higher density of steeper parts, like sort of steeper parts. You can leave obstacles in the trail, like rocks and logs and things like that. So that's where I like to see difficulty get added. And then also just the distance of the trail or the narrowness. Like there's different things that can change it from being a more social experience to a more kind of like, I'm taking risks, I'm navigating, I'm like way out here in the wilderness, that kind of thing. So those like, but I think it's more about like environmental cues or just like sight lines and how much you have to pick up your feet, you know, rather than
In
being about like,
Pennsylvania all the time.
yeah,
Right?
yeah. And then where it has to be steep, I think we like to build steps now,
Yes.
more so. I know a lot of hikers don't like steps, but they really are an efficient, effective way to armor and protect steep steep sections of trail. So
My kids always laugh at me because I swear almost every single trail we get on, there's some kind of steps, so they're like, "Of course, there's steps." The worst one that we did was in, the Great Smoky Mountain National Park. It was the Chimney Rock Trail, and it was just
okay.
steps after steps after steps, and they're
Yeah.
like, "Are we there yet?" I'm like, "I'm sorry. I didn't realize there'd be so many steps."
Yeah, yeah. It's hard as a hiker, but I think once you've built trail and especially repaired damaged
Yeah,
trail,
you
you gain an
understand.
appreciation, yeah, for
Yeah.
what those steps are doing to
I
protect it.
always appreciate the stone steps because 'cause I'm like, "Someone had to move all those stones and build." I'm sure that is, like, a
Tell me
process.
about it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We've built some. I mean, like I said, I'm not a construction focused company. I've
No.
worked a little bit on crews that do that, and it's handwork. Whenever I do steps, I try to do it where I can get a machine in so that we can have machine assist. But it's a lot of work,
It
it just is. There's no way around it. And if you're mining the rock on site, like that adds a whole other element. It's dangerous. It takes its toll on the people who do it. Yeah. So if you see the trail builders, thank them. They work really
always.
hard.
I have seen people who not build the trail, but maintain the trail, and I'm always like, "Thank you so much for doing this." So, are there, any projects that I know it's winter right now as we're speaking, so we just had snow and whatnot. Are there any projects that you are currently working on right now that you'll be kind of implementing in the spring or summer, or are you kind of on a hiatus right now? What are you doing?
Mostly in the winter, I kind of hold a lot of desktop work. I was hoping to get out for some site work. Uh, let's see, in Pittsburgh, and then I have a project local to me also here in Western Maryland where I live. Um, but the ground conditions have not been conducive to
No,
that at all since
no.
basically December 1st. So, that's just on
Been
hold.
awful. Ugh.
Yeah, usually I can get a little bit of site work in, like, and by site work, I mean like scouting and flagging, that kind of thing. So no, I mean, the construction season really starts, I don't know. Sometimes we've done some things in March or April. But
And
May
even
is
the ground's
usually,
even then a little
yeah,
solid, right?
I like to do things in like May and June, which is another thing that's different about me from like uh a more a building focused company. Like they're going to be out as soon as they can. I have the luxury of like scheduling out ahead. So, yeah, I do have a universal access project coming up. Hopefully May and June. That'll be about a month, 5 weeks.
Very nice.
Um, and then after that, I'm not sure. Quite a bit of planning work is lined up. So I'll be in like the Adirondacks, and then, like I said, Pittsburgh. And then I have some desktop work to catch up on too from the fall. So yeah, it's cyclical like that. I think trail folks like that, but winter is just,
The quiet time.
yeah, it's a quiet time. I mean, a lot of trail builders will like, I mean, if they can't build, they'll join ski patrol or they'll travel and ski and do things like that, winter
That sounds
sports.
like fun. Now, do you
Yeah.
do most of your work in the Northeast? Do you kinda maintain that area, or have you gone all across the country?
For the most part, Northeast, Pennsylvania, and New York are the biggest states where I have projects. I have done work in Texas, Illinois, Wyoming, um, like I said, Delaware, Maryland, and I will go anywhere.
Uh,
But most of my work is Pennsylvania and New York.
are you I guess, like, are you more comfortable then designing because it's different terrains, different environments. Are you more comfortable then with, like, Pennsylvania, New York, or are you okay to switch to Texas and
That was okay. Yeah, I mean, it was different. It's just, in getting a sense of the terrain and the geology on that particular site was really interesting. There were kind of these bands of stone. So, um, but the principles are the same,
no matter
and
what? Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But I do like being exposed to different places because I think um, they require different solutions and they require creativity, and
Yeah, and
it's
then use your brain a
really,
little bit more, right?
yeah, yeah, and it's really easy to get into a rut.
Definitely.
And
Yeah.
even culturally, like working in different communities and seeing, what's important there, is really nice. And uh, I think all of those travel projects have also been in relatively small communities. It's not like I'm traveling to like the Great Smoky Mountains or Yellowstone or something like that to work on a trail. Though that would be really cool.
That would be.
I like working on these sort of community centered projects. I think that's really important
like county trails or like small town, like parks, things like
Yeah,
that?
yeah, counties, land trusts or conservancies, things like that,
Love that.
especially if they're driven by the community, but just when they're for the local community, I really think, we all deserve access to high quality recreational
100%.
opportunities. We
Yes.
shouldn't have to travel, multiple states away to find those,
Yep.
so,
Yep.
yeah.
I agree. I agree.
Mhm.
Everyone outdoors. The outdoors is for everybody.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so because even though you didn't really kind of grow up hiking and doing all that, but now doing all this trail design, have you turned into a hiker, or is that like the shoe, like the cobbler's children have no shoes kind of thing? Like, are you like,
Yeah.
no, I don't want to see a trail when I'm not working?
I do like to see trails. I will say I have started as I've aged, which maybe is also strange, but to seek out other ways of being outside. So I picked up like downhill skiing as an adult, whitewater kayaking. I got into mountain biking this last summer, and that's a whole other like part of the industry that I'm
Yes,
excited to learn
yes.
more about.
My husband mountain bikes, and he has his complaints about certain trails with that because
Yeah.
he likes a lot of the elements on the trails, like the jumps and stuff
Yeah.
like that. That's what he wants.
Yeah, and I think mountain bike trails are so interesting because everything feels a little bit exaggerated.
Yeah.
Drainage is still really important, but you want those like just changes in grade and the way turns are built really impacts user experience. And then there's all those opportunities to add fun little features. So um, that's gotten me out on way more trails.
That's
and
fun.
and the thing I love about it is I can see way more trail than if I were walking. I can see miles and miles in a day. So yeah, I've been really enjoying that and getting around and seeing different areas, different mountain bike trails in different areas. So yeah, it's
That's
a
good.
big part of the industry.
Yeah,
So
yeah, definitely. Yeah,
yeah,
and growing, I think, right? Like you said, it's like
yeah,
more and more popular.
definitely. Yeah.
So one of the questions I always ask my guests, and I feel like for you, I might word it a little differently, but I typically ask my guests like when they're hiking, would they prefer to hike like if they only could do one kind of hike for the rest of their life, would they prefer to hike to like a view and overlook or like a water feature like a waterfall? But for you, I'm like, do I ask you if you had to design a trail, like do you prefer designing them to overlooks or to like special features like waterfalls, lakes, things like that?
That's such a good question. I think more frequently I end up designing them to water features. And I think that's a nature of where I work. Pennsylvania, like we don't have very big hills. I haven't designed a ton of overlook. That's really interesting. Um, but I think as a hiker, I prefer overlook style trails. Yeah, I really enjoy that type of trail. I really enjoy, um, trails with some challenge, like, maybe some, like, rock scrambling and, like, I don't know, I'm sure you've done those trails that have, like, the wires so that you can like, hoist yourself up and stuff. I really like bordering on rock climbing, I'm not a rock climber, um, but those types of trails and those, like, I love to just wander, like, this is probably from when I was a kid, like, I didn't spend a lot of time on trails, but I did spend a ton of time wandering around in the woods, and that's what I do as a job now,
Yeah.
so I still really like that, like, I just like kind of bushwhacking and exploring and seeing all the weird stuff that's in the woods, so, um, yeah, but I think overlooks, if I had to pick, like, I would like to
Okay.
design more of
Yeah,
those,
there's no wrong
yeah.
answer and as far as
Yeah.
I'm concerned. To me,
There
it's like,
I
what day of the week is it? What am I in the mood for, you know?
Yeah, I've always just loved, landscapes where you feel really small,
Yes.
or where I feel really small, and I feel like that's also unique to, like, the West, or we don't have a ton of that in the
No.
Northeast.
But you can still
Um,
like, there are some times where you're just at the top and you're like, "Wow, like, look at everything out there."
yeah, there's some good ones over, like, next door to me in West Virginia, like,
Mhm.
some just
I
gorgeous
love West
scenic
Virginia.
overlooks. Yeah, 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 fantastic, good
I like
stuff.
hiking there. Any opportunity that we can. We can't always get there, but when we
Mhm.
can, I'm like, "Let's go to West Virginia." And New
Mhm,
York too,
mhm.
I think, has some incredible hikes.
Yeah, New
New
York
York
really
is
does,
people don't
yeah.
always think about that, but they do. Even down, like, in the Hudson Valley and stuff
The
like
Hudson
that, yeah.
Valley, yeah, 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 I was fortunate to work on a trail crew kind of in the Hudson Valley, and, that just beautiful. We were there in the fall, and it was
So
stunning.
gorgeous. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. But all right, so if anyone wanted to hire you to design a trail, where would they find you?
Oh, sure. I'm on the internet at www.penntrails.com. Um, you can also find Penn Trails on Instagram and Facebook, though I don't update. I'm not very active, but you can find me personally on Instagram at shovelreadysarah. That's my
Okay.
personal Instagram. So, and yeah, there's a phone number on the website. I think you can like fill out a web form and it'll send me an email. So
That's
that's
awesome.
the best way. Yeah.
Well, Sarah, thank you so much for being here, sharing your experience designing trails, giving us a definite appreciation for the process behind the trail design.
Mhm.
So when we're out there, we can be like, did they have to worry about, borders and
Yeah. Oh
whatnot?
my gosh. Yeah, you
But
bet. Thank you so much for having me, Lauren. It's
yes.
been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Her Side of the Trail. There are more hiker stories to hear, so please follow along to hear them as soon as they come out. And if you like this episode, please share it with your friends or on social media. Her Side of the Trail is hosted and produced by me, Lauren Stites. I can't wait to share another hiker story with you next episode.